February 10th. We'd like to call to order the it's 10 at 7, or I'm sorry, 8:30 in the morning, and call to order the Technology and Reform Committee. Today we only have one item on the agenda. So an update or a budget presentation from Commissioner Tones. I think we have Deputy Commissioner Eichten, as well as I believe Rohit Tandon is here as well. And so what we'd like to do is Commissioner Tones, I think you've done this before. Introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Curran. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. My name for the record is Tarek Combs. I am the Chief Information Officer for the state of Minnesota and the Commissioner of Minnesota IT Services. Really appreciative and thankful for the opportunity to present the governor's recommended change items that will help move technology forward for the state of Minnesota to really serve Minnesotans more efficiently and effectively, and certainly lead and support a more efficient delivery of state services. Really appreciative, Senator Curran, to you and Senator Wickland and really the entire legislative body for all of the many contributions for the Blue Ribbon Council on Information Technology and the TAC, and certainly appreciative and look forward to this conversation today. I'm going to provide a few slides, just a little bit of background related to MNIT, what we do, size and scope, and then Deputy Commissioner John Eichten will walk through the supplemental budget items, if that's okay. From a overall kind of 100,000 foot level, the mission, vision, and values, and the culture that we aspire to have, that we work on so hard, is really intended to bring about the best of what public sector does as it relates to technology, and really using technology as a facilitator for change and opportunity, and really a forward-looking delivery of government services. And that's really so important to us as we are competing so hard for a very limited technologist landscape in Minnesota. The number of technologists really across the country, and certainly in Minnesota, it's a really tight labor market, and that culture of being able to use technology to really help people ultimately is one of the unbelievably most important drivers to attracting people to our state workforce, and really excited about the work that we've done in the last couple, 2-3 years, and the types of people that we've been able to attract. Technology, as you know, plays a really critical role in providing state services, really a technology underpinning in most all services that are provided, and across the world and in the United States. Never has that been more highlighted than in the last couple of years with the COVID-19 pandemic. As so many constructs change, people are working from different places, and people are expecting to be served in different ways. And we've seen that innovation in the private sector in so many different ways, and we certainly have seen that innovation in the public sector as well, as a lot of services were delivered and rendered in ways that probably we would have imagined to see in 5 to 10 years, and that so-called digital transformation was really accelerated. Over the last decade, I think Minnesota IT Services has worked incredibly hard as the internal IT organization for the executive branch of state government. We've really set a course to realize the vision of being the most innovative digital government that works for everyone. And we relentlessly work at that, at connecting with the people that we serve, and making sure that we are continually laying the groundwork for a culture that always connects with how we serve people, and making sure that we serve people effectively with technology. We aim to partner to deliver secure, reliable technology solutions that really help everyone. You see our guiding principles. There are 10 guiding principles that we really attempt to live by all the time, and certainly during the pandemic, many of those guiding principles, really carried us well and a lot of them not always easy. Embracing change, the change items that we're going to discuss with you today certainly are a lot about embracing change, not just related to how services are delivered, but also how technologists work in a really positive way, measuring, using data to really inform the decisions that we make, and really want to highlight the engaging people with empathy, just making sure that we understand that the impacts that technology has and how technology is viewed and how services are viewed are very different. And our goal, of course, to serve all Minnesotans, irrespective of where you are, in a consistent manner and engaging from an empathetic perspective as it relates to the role that technology plays. Next slide, please. So just a couple of numbers just to share with you. Minnesota IT Services has approximately 2,400 staff. We work across 90 plus physical locations. We currently have a mixture of staff members that are in an office or on-site location. Some of our staff have worked diligently throughout the pandemic from beginning to end in office locations. Really, putting themselves at risk, but really putting the work that they do ahead of everything else. And then we have a large percentage of our workforce that also works remotely, and really proud of the work that our technologists, public sector technologists have done. We support the entirety of the executive branch, over 35,000 end users. We have an application portfolio of approximately 2,800 agency applications at over 1,300 locations. So a lot of complexity, and certainly the application portfolio, and we'll get into that with some of the change items. Really, that is the transactions that power, if you will, the business of state government. And being able to really mature that portfolio to reduce risk related to cyber threats, but also reduce risk of tech debt, and make sure that technology is an innovative force that allows for an efficient and effective delivery of services is incredibly important. We oversee approximately a little bit over 300 projects with major IT components. Certainly the entirety of the supplemental budget that the governor has proposed includes many items, as any proposed budget includes many items that have technology underpinnings, and we're really eager and excited to deliver on those projects as efficiently and effectively. And as Senator Coran and Senator Wicklund are aware, the things that we have done related to maturing that approach together with our business partners related to implementing a modernization playbook, the methodology that we look to deliver projects. And so much of that is really centered around providing and delivering value as quickly as possible. A move away from really large monolithic projects that only deliver value at a longer period of time to ones that deliver and prove out value much quicker. The project budget is approximately $300 million. Just from a numbers perspective, we deliver approximately 3.5 million emails per week, and certainly during the pandemic and the period afterwards, in this period of hyper productivity, have seen some of those kind of productivity metrics, if you will, increase, where the number of messages that are received, the number of messages that are sent by technologists, the number of meetings that are attended by the executive branch as a whole has gone up. From an infrastructure perspective, we maintain approximately 7,000 servers in a variety of ways. From a solutioning perspective, just wanted to call out from a philosophical approach, if you will, when there's a new business need, we really look to see if we can rent a solution first. And rent a solution sometimes is analogous to consuming a cloud-based solution, but we look to see if we can rent a solution first. If we can't rent a solution, we look to see if we can buy a solution, procuring what is sometimes referred to as a COTS solution, procuring a vendor-based solution that is deployed on infrastructure as such as those servers that are illuminated. And then if we can't rent something, and if we can't buy something really, then that's that space where you're into building something. But we really only want to build something where the need is so unique and the benefit for the executive branch is so unique that it calls for a custom effort. So really priority is rent, buy, and last build. Next slide, please. Just a quick slide to share with you how MNIT is funded. Approximately $646 million of technology spend, if you will, that MNIT helps to deliver on. Only 1% of our funding, approximately 1% of our funding is actually general fund. The blue slice kind of at the top, $193 million are services that we provide to the enterprise that, generally all agencies consume in one way, shape or another, things like telephony type services, communication and collaboration services, network services, those kind of core services that any organization, any enterprise, whether it's private sector or public sector, provides to make sure that office workers are productive. And then the bottom slice really points at that IT application and projects fund, which is the predominant or the larger share of those. And these ratios are important because they kind of get at how much new are you doing, how much are you able to transform the existing services that exist. Next slide, please. So wanted to take just a second on this slide and apologize, but I want to really take a moment because when we think about our supplemental budget items that the governor has recommended, they really come down to a common set of really important things for state government, I believe, that are provided in a number of different supplemental change items, but they really all get at the same thing. So I'd just like to take a moment just to read this. Aging technology increases cyber and operational risk and makes it more challenging for Minnesotans to access services. Modernizing this technology via cloud platforms will reduce risk, improve resilience, and transform Minnesotans' experience when interacting with state government. And I think, apologize for my dog in the background here, I really think that the collective of what we have done, what the legislature has done from a cybersecurity perspective is incredibly important. And it has really improved our ability to defend and respond. But building bigger walls alone can't always protect us. Sometimes we need to make sure that while we're building these walls as it relates to cyber defenses, that we're also transforming those things that are within those walls and leveraging cloud-based services where we only pay for what we use and improving service areas with significant technical debt. And technical debt, frequently also means ineffective or inefficient business process or service delivery is really vital to protecting the digital assets of the state. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner John Eichten to just go into detail on the supplemental budget items. Thank you.
Commissioner Thomas, before you move on the one financial figure, you listed $300 million MNIT budget, and then you showed all of the other spend, I don't know, some $670 million. With the $300 million for MNIT, as you described in the initial statement, does that include just those housed within the MNIT facilities of your staff, or are those the staff all throughout the agencies? That doesn't seem to be differentiated in this slide set. So could you clarify that for us?
Brendan, if you could go to the next slide. So the spend here is for the entirety of things that are spent on technology related items, which would include services that the state consumes. So not just services that MNIT technologists directly deliver, services that we consume from external providers. The FAST services would be an example of that. So this spend includes all of that. The $193 million is really that set of enterprise services that are really, it's a little bit more than this, but it's really office worker productivity, those things that allow an office to exist, the networks, the wireless networks, desktop support, office and collaboration tools, security software that certainly protects all those things, virtual private networks to work remotely, or remote working construct. And then the $419 million are IT applications and projects that MNIT supports, sometimes delivered via external partners, frequently delivered via external partners, where we play an oversight role in managing those vendors and making sure that the vital connections and integrations exist.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. And so we have, I'm remiss for not introducing the newest member to our committee, Senator Hoffman. Senator Hoffman, follow up to that question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Karan. I want to spend the next 45 minutes just talking about this with you. So one of the things we get is especially in Health and Human Services, you always see there's an IT side of it, and I'm trying to understand, does MNIT staff assigned to different state agencies, or MNIT staff assigned within other jurisdictions, is that counted in your 300 million, Commissioner? Or because we do see other slides from other agencies that you'll embed IT services and MNIT services in there, and I can differentiate between the service side of it, but I'm trying to get to the personnel side of it. If you could clarify that for Chair Karan in this committee, that would be great. Thanks.
Commissioner Thomas.
Senator Karan and committee members, thank you for clarifying that question. The answer is yes. So it is included in this number. So when you see change items from various agencies like the Department of Human Services, for whatever components are part of their change items, that number is included in this. So it is not additive to this. That includes the MNIT technologists or the types of services that are procured. So this number is inclusive of the entirety.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. And so before we move to Mr. Eichten, Senator Drahan, question?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner. Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me there? Sorry. Thank you, Chair and Commissioner, and thank your staff for us. My question has to do with all those applications you guys try to keep up and running, and I know a lot of them are antiquated. It would be helpful for us if we had some kind of list, and I know 2,800 is quite a few apps, but or applications of kind of the age of some of these applications, and probably more importantly, the usage of some of these applications. How do you guys, what metrics do you use to track a priority list, or do you have a list of applications that get used more than others?
Commissioner Thomas.
Senator Karan and Senator Drahan, thank you for that question. We do. Maintaining an application portfolio, if you will, for an enterprise is really important. Over the last 24 to 36 months, we have really spent a lot of time maturing the process, methodology, tools that we use to maintain that application portfolio. Ultimately, we on a regular basis present that application portfolio via our CBTOs to agency leadership, to commissioners, assistant commissioners, to agency leadership, so that they understand the value that applications play within their agency. And business really makes that vital decision related to divesting out of applications that are no longer serving their business need. We really do believe, though, it is an important role that we play in sharing that application portfolio, the age of it, the effectiveness or ineffectiveness at times, certainly the technology that, and we do have that application portfolio enumerated out with attributes such as the types of technology and age. And one of the supplemental budget items, Senator Drahan, is geared towards specifically those areas that are frequently underfunded or not funded, where applications may not be necessarily even meeting business needs directly or meeting Minnesotans' needs directly. where there's also a significant amount of technical debt, really old technology that poses a tremendous cyber risk. And so it's really a combination of being able to improve business processes, service delivery to Minnesotans, and reducing the cyber debt that really gets at the tremendous risk that we face. We do have that list. Certainly would be willing to, would love to follow up with you related to the best way to put that together. I think one item that is really important in this discussion is that our business partners drive that application portfolio. They really are the decision makers related to the what in terms of applications, the resiliency needs of applications. We prioritize our application portfolio in different priorities. There are priority 1 applications, which is really the biggest of applications, those that at times may pose a life safety risk, if you will, or really a tremendous risk to Minnesotans. Things like unemployment insurance, is an example of a priority 1 application. We have priority 2 applications, and then priority 3 applications, which are the smaller ones. For organizations in generally, large complex organizations, application portfolio rationalization, being able to divest out of applications that are no longer really needed or being able to combine is really important. And that's why the work that we've done in building our methodology and process surrounding the application portfolio so that our business partners can make those decisions is really important.
Thank you.
Senator, okay. Commissioner Chelms, along the line, so would you provide a copy of that inventory? I think it's going to be that item that drives our further conversations based on your future presentation and our continued work on modernization of not just the infrastructure backend, but the forward-facing consumer agency or all of those dependent solution or all the dependent people who are driving service, providing service either locally, regionally, or whatever. So if you could do that, that would help us get that better understanding, because I know we've talked in the past as well. And I know you provided last year a brief list of what you thought was a high priority modernization effort for self-service. So, and I think we've spoken in the past, we need to see that holistically, because we may see some high priority needs that may need legislative clarity to allow us to move in some of those higher priority modernizations or move into self-service. So if you would share that with all the members on the committee, we'd appreciate it. So with that, we'll move on to Deputy Commissioner Eichten. Commissioner Eichten, please state your name and position for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is John Eichten. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Minnesota IT Services. I'll walk through the change items that MNIT is putting forward through the governor's budget recommendations in a little more detail here. So starting off with the first change item, targeted application modernization. As the commissioner mentioned, the state really faces a significant amount of IT debt resulting from the development of applications over the last decades that now stand in need of modernization and replacement. The funding proposed in this change item would enable a much more systematic approach to the modernization of these at-risk and aging applications. Again, amongst that significant 2,000 plus application portfolio. It'll do that by providing funding at an enterprise level to support a more strategic and consistent approach to modernization. At the most fundamental level, these aging applications create risk in our overall IT environment. It not only puts at risk the agencies who rely on the specific applications, but it also puts at risk the whole of executive branch IT operations. And ultimately, from a business perspective, these aging applications constrain and hold back business partners from really transforming the way that they deliver services and doing that in a more modern, human-centered manner. There are several benefits to taking a more systematic approach to application modernization. First, and I would say most importantly, we will be able to address application level vulnerabilities that exist in aging tech systems and components. These vulnerabilities create doors for cyber actors to enter, to move laterally in our environments, and ultimately to steal or hold hostage data that is critical to effective government operations. So an enterprise approach will enable us to standardize and these modernized applications on commercially available platforms and services. And what that will do is reduce the complexity of our overall environment complexity that's really resulted from the previously siloed development of custom applications and agencies across state government over years and decades. By reducing that complexity and by housing these applications on cloud-based infrastructure, as we'll get into in the second change item, with more cost-effective continuity capabilities, will improve the reliability of these applications and help ensure that state government service delivery can operate on a stable, resilient foundation moving forward. Lastly, it's important to note how this type of enterprise approach enables the state to advance recommendations from the governor's, what was previously the Blue Ribbon Council on IT, it's now the Technology Advisory Council. The chair, Senator Wickland, are both members, in addition to recommendations from the Office of the Legislative Auditor. So in a lot of those discussions in the TAC and the BRC, we talked about how many of the most fundamental components that dictate or contribute to the success or failure of IT modernization efforts really have nothing to do with coding or servers. Success depends on how well we and our business partners engage with frontline staff, with users, with stakeholders to understand their pain points and their problems. Success depends on a willingness to change the way we do our work on the IT side and on the business side, and to alter, if not overhaul, long-standing business processes and put Minnesotans at the center of our system and service delivery designs. By taking an enterprise approach to modernization of these service delivery tools, we can help ensure that these best practices are present in the specific projects and initiatives that result from this funding, and that ultimately we're leveraging these funds to provide the type of digital experience that Minnesotans have increasingly come to expect when interacting with organizations, both public and private. So for this work, MNIT is requesting roughly $5.25 million in the current biennium and $14.625 million in the 24-25 biennium. We also want to just illustrate, if we could briefly, and I don't want to repeat a presentation that the chair and other members may have seen in a TAC committee meeting, but to provide you an example of what this sort of looks like from a user perspective. Can give you a side-by-side of an old existing legacy solution, if we could advance the slide here, to Apply MN, which was the legacy solution essentially for the Department of Human Services for a customer portal for the application and for different assistance programs, SNAP, TANF, cash assistance, these types of DHS programs. On average, it was a 1 hour long application process. There was no ability via the online service to do document uploading. As you can see with the screen on the left there, it was not user friendly from a device perspective. It was navigable via computer, but via a phone or a tablet, it would be a significant challenge for a user. And once modernized, this was a modernization effort that was a partnership with Code for America. If you're familiar with that organization, you can see the experience on the right. It's a much more human-centered experience, a simplified design, a 15-minute application process, the ability to do document upload via the camera on the phone, live chat assistance for users who may be experiencing problems, and then at the end, a user satisfaction assessment to understand, was this experience a positive one? And overall, the user feedback has been very positive for this tool. You'll see on some examples of the user feedback that's come in through MN benefits, down in the middle. I'm 76 and completed the app without difficulty, very user-friendly, not a ton of text to wade through. On the far left, it was extremely easy to fill out, took me way less than 20 minutes to apply. I will say, in addition, the feedback that we've heard from the counties has been very positive. There was an initial group of counties that were part of a pilot group. It's now been expanded statewide as of last year. And it's become a pretty central tool for case managers and county staff to be able to direct clients to upload documents as necessary to maintain their eligibility or respond to information requests. And I recall, we put a smile on our face to hear Deputy Commissioner Chuck Johnson talk about, he thinks in his 30 years, I believe, of experience in the human services world, that there's not a single sort of distinct action that the department's taken that he can think of that drew more of a pleased and satisfied response from the counties. And that is really that power to delight is a phrase we use related to human-centered design, and it really speaks to the power of technology to make these experiences smoother and make interacting with government easier. So moving on to the second change item, it is related to the first. If the first is about modernization of those business-specific applications that, as the commissioner said, transact the work of state government, think of this one as the foundation upon which those applications live and modernizing that foundation. So MNIT's enterprise cloud transformation change item is really intended to accelerate the state's transition from traditional on-premise hosted IT infrastructure into more modern public cloud service environments, enabling MNIT and our business partners to realize a range of benefits that have driven organizations around the globe really toward the use of cloud technologies. These benefits, they include built-in continuity, resilience, and disaster recovery capabilities that would not be feasible from a budget perspective via the current on-premise hosting model. It also includes scalable cybersecurity capabilities that allow us to much more cost-effectively improve our security posture, opportunities to speed innovation and enable much more rapid solutioning via cloud service capabilities that are just not available within physical data centers and that really are baked in by design in a cloud environment. And when I talk about a cloud environment, so being very clear, think of the big public cloud service providers, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. Those are the type of providers that in general, the industry is heading toward from a hosting perspective. And those are the types of services that the state would consume via this change item as well. One of the challenges that any organization has, though, when making a move to the cloud is a cost bubble resulting from really the overlap period. And that's the period during which the organization is still in the midst of the transition and incurring expenses for both the cloud hosting solutions and on-premise hosting services. And funding of this change item is intended to mitigate that impact and enable a much more rapid transition to the cloud, minimizing that overlap period and really hastening the realization of both the cost and the capability benefits of cloud computing. And I wanted to just reflect for a moment on what cloud computing demonstrated for us throughout the last 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. The agency that was really a leader in this space, working with a very skilled and committed MNIT team is the Department of Health. They embarked on a cloud journey several years ago. They're really the only agency that has the vast majority of their systems currently hosted via the cloud. And it was that capability that really enabled them to scale solutions, to implement solutions rapidly, to buttress legacy solutions that were still being maintained, but to build capability around them that would enable them to manage really unprecedented volumes and constant demands for new capabilities and data interchange to aid in pandemic response efforts. It was a clear indicator for us that from a risk and operational perspective, we needed to accelerate the shift for the rest of the executive branch agencies.
Commissioner Eichman, we do have a question before you continue on. Senator, it's great that you highlight Department of Health and Human Services on both spectrums, right? The modernization of on the front end users for the agency that still has green screens for the county customers. So I know we're working on that, but it's great to see that dichotomy of 30-year-old technology that our counties are forced to utilize. So Senator Hoffman has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And John, thank you. What prompted me is this conversation of integration of services. And in the presentation on Tuesday, the Department of Human Services is looking at a $77.5 million investment, specifically funding and supporting their IT systems work in transforming human service delivery and create an integrated person-centered experience. Aside from that, what they did highlight there, John, was the MN benefits application. And so help me understand this. If we're requesting in the Department of Human Services 68 FTEs specifically in supporting IT systems, that comes out of the human services bucket. And if I'm getting too in the weeds on here, I'm just trying to help me understand where the process of the funding stream comes in from, because that MN benefits application, first of all, John, kudos to whoever in your department designed that, because that absolutely was a game changer for a lot of people out there. And so, but take me back to this agency-wide transition to a more agile IT, and how is that affected within what you're saying?
Commissioner Eichen?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, Senator Hoffman. So I'll try and tease these apart to bring some clarity, because it is a complex situation from a funding perspective. So the change items that the agencies bring forward are change items to modernize specific applications that support their work, and they'll include, as in the case of the DHS transformation change item, the business staff that are necessary to potentially backfill positions that are involved in the modernization work. It'll include funding for the MNIT staff that are necessary to advance the modernization, as well as funding for vendor services, any contractors that are needed. You'll see that in really every committee, change items moving forward for those types of efforts. What MNIT is proposing is a central enterprise pool of funds to target a specific set of applications that they're not the massive applications like a METS or an MMIS or a Maxis or a Gentax or MinDrive. We're talking about the multitude of applications that are within that 2,800 application portfolio that are smaller to medium-sized in nature. They're where a more targeted, sort of systematic data-driven approach can reduce overall risk and ensure that the projects we do take on, that the best practices around business process modernization are being employed. So we're actually proposing a change to the overall approach to how we fund IT modernization, and approaching that from a systematic enterprise perspective, and target those smaller to medium-sized applications that don't always rise to the urgency level of an agency change item. To just pivot back to the conversation you're having previously with the commissioner, that pie chart represents all IT spend for all agencies. The vast majority of that funding flows through the agencies, and then MNIT charges back for its services. So want to be really clear that these are not duplicative requests. They're actually, if you think of the DHS service transformation requests and MNITs, they're quite complementary, because the change item before us here is really laying the foundation via cloud services for these new modernized DHS applications to be built. In addition, what DHS is proposing is really a change to the way that MNIT staff and their business staff at DHS and vendor partners interact in the way that we maintain, support, and enhance IT systems. And it's perfectly aligned with the recommendations that are coming out of the Blue Ribbon Council and the Technology Advisory Committee, that we need to, as the commissioner said previously, stop engaging in these multi-year monolithic system implementation projects. We need to work much more iteratively to return value faster. We need constant business engagement and ability to make swift decisions in order to maximize the value return on these IT investments. And then we need to use best of breed solutions from the market and integrate those solutions together to create an environment that will best support the services, rather than putting sort of all of our eggs in one monolithic system basket, going behind a curtain for many years, and then coming back in hopes that we've delivered a system that's going to work for everyone. It needs to be a much more user-centered, iterative process where we are constantly enhancing, constantly looking for feedback from users, from the counties, from the DHS staff, from the ultimate clients of these services, so that we can iteratively improve them over time and really maintain them as foundational products that are needed for effective service delivery. I hope that helps tease it apart to some extent, and that I've brought clarity and not more confusion to the situation.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a fault, yeah, John, I wish you would have been there Tuesday to when the assistant commissioners were presenting this. All we really saw in this service delivery transformation continuation was just 68 FTEs in this $77.5 million budget, and it was like a sticker shock. And if the information you just gave to Chair Curran's committee would have been a part of that presentation on Tuesday, I think there would have been a better understanding of how MNIT is integrated within the department. This has been very helpful, Mr. Chair, for me in the 2 different hats I wear. Thanks.
Thanks, Senator Hoffman. Commissioner Eichten?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sort of, I guess, transitioning back to the slide deck here, I'll just close this change item number 2 out. For this work, MNIT's requesting $14.5 million across 2 biennia. That would help MNIT bring in additional workforce and professional technical assistance to support this transition, as well as to procure required software services and Microsoft licensing for cloud-based communications, collaboration, and low-code, no-code development tools, just to give you some of the specifics behind the funding details. Transitioning to the 3rd change item, I believe we can use that slide if we really want to nerd out and dive into some of the architectural details, though I might ask for my colleague, Chief Technology Officer Nyberg, to weigh in if the committee is interested in doing that. But continuing forward, as far as the change items, the 3rd one is related to the cybersecurity grant program, or more aptly called the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, which was part of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed in August of 2021. In order to receive these federal funds for state and local cybersecurity needs, state governments are required to work with local governments on the development of joint cybersecurity plans that ultimately guide the allocation of these grant dollars. The program requires that 80% of total funding be used on projects supporting cyber improvements for local government, with the remaining 20% available for state initiatives. The allocation of this funding would be guided by a cybersecurity planning committee that MNIT would take the lead in forming, incorporating representation from various levels of government, cities, counties, tribal governments. And while more detailed program guidelines are still being developed by the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, we know these state matching dollars will be required to pull down the associated federal dollars and support these needed enhancements at the state and local level. So with ransomware events on the rise, many of them targeting local governments that lack the funding to sufficiently secure their operations, this funding will be critical to help combat these shared threats to the reliable operation of government at all levels. So you can see the details here, state match of roughly 1.8 million in the current biennium to pull down 10.8 in federal dollars, and then 2.3 in the next biennium to pull down roughly 7.2 in federal dollars. The next change item is related to the Children's Cabinet. This change item would create a dedicated funding source for investment in interagency IT initiatives. They're really intended to bridge agency lines, better serve Minnesota children and families through more integrated service delivery mechanisms. As we work toward more human-centered approaches to providing government service, it becomes clearer and clearer that the traditional agency structures for delivering services can hinder our ability to create smooth, citizen-centric experiences for families. The Children's Cabinet has identified opportunities to bridge those agency divides to deliver more intelligent services that reduce barriers for families, improve overall efficiency and effectiveness through interagency data sharing and service integration. However, the traditional agency-based IT funding model that we were discussing earlier can hinder their ability to advance these opportunities and ultimately realize the benefits from a more integrated interagency approach in areas such as childhood development screening, easier access to needed resources for improving early learning and development outcomes, school-based nutrition programs, among other initiatives. For this change item, MNIT is requesting $1 million in the current biennium and $2 million in the upcoming biennium. Moving to the 5th change item here. This change item is related to technology digital accessibility, and this funding would support an external third-party assessment of current applications and online services in the state's environment. As the pace of technology advancement continues to grow, it's critical that we maintain a focus on ensuring the accessibility of state services for Minnesotans with disabilities. In this case, accessibility via web-based digital platforms. The pandemic has really highlighted this need, as so much of our daily lives have increasingly relied on the ability to interact via digital means. And this third-party assessment would help us identify gaps and opportunities to improve the accessibility of current state applications and online services. And then the last change item is again related to technology accessibility, but this is not a general fund change item. This is funding from the Telecommunications Access Minnesota Fund that has been used to support the Office of the Chief Information Accessibility Officer, Jay Wyant. If any of you've interacted with him, he has a limited staff, one other full-time staff person, and a student worker that make a valiant effort to promote a community, a network of accessibility officers in agencies on the business and the minute side across the executive branch, but they're experiencing increasing cost pressures. So this is what amounts to an operating adjustment for that group to maintain current service levels and frankly, keep that sufficient funding for that student worker position to stay on board. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have and appreciate the time.
Thanks, Commissioner Knight. We have a question from Senator Port.
Thank you, Chair Coran. Going back to the children's cabinet change item, can you talk a little bit more about that and how that collaboration between the agencies might help to reach more people in Minnesota to help connect them to benefits?
Absolutely. Mr. Chair, Senator Port. Yeah, I would speak to this on a few different levels, and a commissioner may want to weigh in as well here because he's had a lot of interaction with the Children's Cabinet. Really, since the beginning of this administration, there's been a real focus put on children and families and how we can deliver services to those children and families without forcing them to navigate the internal agency silos of state government. The average citizen does not care whether it's the Department of Human Services, the Department of Education, a county, what part of government is delivering the service. And technology, including the item we highlighted before with Min Benefits, highlights an opportunity to really break down those barriers to create doors, human-centered design doors into state government services that families can interact with and provide information once to us instead of providing it multiple times to multiple agencies to be determined eligible for different programs. It also, the cabinet is also looking at the opportunities to enhance data sharing across agencies to be able to better measure whether we're actually achieving the outcomes related to children and families that we're hoping to achieve, to better design changes in service delivery mechanisms and use data to really inform those changes and make sure that ultimately the dollars that are being put into children and family supports are realizing the outcomes that we want to achieve. And they've made significant progress in breaking down some of the sort of barriers from a policy and legal perspective to how we can better work together across state agencies. But one of the obstacles they've hit is that when they identify these opportunities, even if they're not hugely expensive, they run up against the individual agencies' pre-existing IT priorities that may be driven by changes in statute that occur every session, changes in federal regulations. Oftentimes, the IT projects that result are not really optional. They need to be done for legal compliance reasons. And having a pool of dollars available to the cabinet, since they are not a state agency per se, will enable them to really act on these opportunities and overcome that pre-existing IT priority obstacle that too often they've run up against. And that's something working with them we've recognized, because ultimately it's Minute doing the IT work in the end, but it has to be translated through the business priority setting, as the commissioner said, that that each agency does. This creates sort of a release valve and that funding can be directed and be brought to bear to make sure that opportunity can be taken advantage of without having to deprioritize, a legal compliance project or a security improvement project.
Senator Port, follow up.
That's really helpful. Just appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Eichen, so along those lines, I like us putting a user interface in there that really covers up the ineffectiveness of government, just the cross-agency complexities when somebody, regardless of who they are. We focused a lot on children, families, and learning. That's wonderful, and we should continue to do that. What I don't hear is that dialogue being talked about across all of Minnesota's businesses and every individual who's required to interact with government. I personal experience. And so, we did the very thing in the 2000s with the Department of Revenue and the Department of Deed. And when you look at those, you have the same businesses, have the same reporting and payment requirements and quarterly and UI. And through their modernization efforts and that the desired agencies always pull back and operate in that isolated environment. Instead of having a unified environment, operating with a single business ID, filing and paying through one portal, and then disseminating through the various agencies. Instead, they roll back to 2 individual business ID numbers, 2 individual transactions, dual reporting for the same people. And those are costs to all businesses in Minnesota. So what I'd like to see is for you guys, when we talk about these things, you should be driving that across every platform. I know you work for the agencies, but I want to know who that is. And if you're not it, I'm not sure who would be it. To bring through when we inventory all those agencies and not just bringing through the inventory of the agencies, we should be inventorying who do they interact with and how many times is a single business required to interact with how many different agencies and the frequency. That's the matrix we need to look at to make sure we're actually serving all Minnesotans. Because I truly believe, this is the one way we can mask some structural ineffectiveness or inefficiencies that we have, county green screens and all those things. But for our citizens, again, they don't have a choice. So I would love to see as we roll out that matrix and we look at self-service, I'd really like to see the matrix as we roll out to who's required to interact with who and when. And I think you guys are certainly the agency to do that. So any comments from Commissioner? I know there was no question embedded in there, but if not, Senator Wickland does have a question. Senator Wickland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just was wondering if either Commissioner Eichten or CISO Tannen could talk about how the infrastructure of cybersecurity infrastructure work is it embedded in any of these change items, or is there another way that you're kind of in a parallel path assessing and maintaining your infrastructure? I'm just wondering if there is, that you've spoken about how there is a cybersecurity component to the transformation that you're considering with the cloud transformation item and the application modernization item. Can you talk a little bit about a little bit more detail about how we're strengthening our overall cybersecurity? Is it coming about as a part of these change requests? Thanks.
Commissioner Tomes, would you like to direct that to one of your members?
Absolutely. Senator Coran, Senator Wickland, committee members, I'll ask our Chief Information Security Officer, Roy Tannen, to chime in. But I think your question is an excellent one, and it really is a little bit at the heart and root of this supplemental budget recommendation from the governor, in that you cannot secure technology services or services that have a technology underpinning by only investing in cybersecurity protections. Those cybersecurity protections are incredibly important. Endpoint protection, denial of services, related services, our ability to react to cyber events. You also have to get at what the actual makeup of those applications and services are, and how do you improve the resiliency of those services. You know, certainly a move to cloud constructs that have built-in resiliency, a greater security awareness, if you will, certainly greater resources and capacity from a partner perspective related to how to respond to those types of events. And then also getting at that tech debt, areas where patching may be prohibited, where the types of vulnerabilities, as an example, without getting into the details, not too long ago, there was a national alert related to a cyber-related vulnerability for a particular application stack, if you will. And we had well over, as most organizations did, so that this number isn't an anomaly, but we had over 300 instances of this particular technology component able to quickly react, able to quickly remediate. But it's the type of work that happens on an ongoing basis, depending on how applications are architected, and we won't see any less of that. When you use these common components from vendors and bigger constructs, our ability to make sure that we're modernizing not just the technology, the cyber tools that we use to protect, but also modernizing the types of services and how they're delivered. Rohit, will you chime in, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Rohit Tandon. I'm the MNIT Chief Information Security Officer. Commissioner Tarek already said almost everything I was going to cover, but I might add a few more context regarding the question of what are those infrastructure elements. And the item number 1 and 2 cover, I think, breadth of the executive branch of the infrastructure. The cloud transformation is really looking at the infrastructure to see how that can be improved for the executive branch as a whole. The other item I think I might call out is the modernization effort. Those applications also need to be modernized on that infrastructure. So security was a value item listed on the slide deck that Deputy Eichten presented as well for the executive branch side of things. But as a whole of state, and that infrastructure act that's got some cybersecurity allocation has the matching funds that needs to also benefit statewide. And the matching dollars that will provide to activate the federal grant is really necessary to propel that farther ahead. It is important to note that the lack of formal security planning that is being defined right now as part of the IJA guidance, which we are still waiting on clarity from federal guidelines to really define the structure of how that will navigate. It does not mean MNIT has not been prioritizing that support area for local governments. We have, for over 10 years, supported local governments through our statewide security monitoring initiatives that has multiple layers of security, from MNIT, DDoS defenses, to even the endpoint detection and response capabilities that Commissioner Tones just referred to a few minutes ago. Thank you.
Senator Wickman, follow up?
No, I'll just say about that grant program. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the details, because I guess I'm hearing from my local communities that they are looking for ways to get assistance with their cybersecurity needs, because they realize it's really important at the school district and community city level. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about how that program will get implemented, and how we can kind of spread the word that local entities who might not have known about other possible assistance could apply for these grants. So thanks.
Commissioner Tones.
Senator Coran and Senator Wickland, I was just going to mention, and I believe you're aware of this. One of the things with that grant program that is really important is that a collaborative group, which includes representation from the legislature, from the private sector, from counties and cities, from tribal nations, we're going to lead or put together, that group. We're going to leverage the TAC that is going to build that plan for exactly how we're going to support that. So I just want to underscore that it is not going to be a one singular perspective of the best way to deliver and support those resources, but really a strategic approach that makes best use of those funds. What we don't want to do is buy a lot of things that, have a security, component to them, but ultimately really don't move the state's security posture forward as effectively as possible, and really looking forward to that collaboration with many of the TAC members, and we'll add additional external members, private sector CISOs, to that body to really inform the best strategy to use these really limited resources in the most effective way possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Tomes. And along those lines, Senator Wickman, follow up to that? Okay. Along those lines, and the consolidation, right? We finally got the consolidation, and I think one enhanced our cybersecurity because we have an envelope that we can more effectively manage. But one of the things that we did, or we talked about when we funded the consolidation of this, the data centers, was a $10 million savings in tails and ongoing because of operational costs. So one, where did that money go? When I look at the couple of these requests, they look in that range. So one, if the savings weren't realized, why not? And two, if they have been realized, where did those dollars go?
Senator Coran and committee members, as we shared on the financial slide, only 1% of MNIT's funding is general funding. And so all of it is related to rate-based services that we provide, or either the services that we deliver from a projects and initiatives perspective. One of the things that we do as a part of our rate setting process is we always go to market and benchmark the services that we provide against the marketplace with external market providers, just to make sure that the types of services and rates. And so, as you can imagine, as has happened, not just in government in Minnesota, probably slower, to be honest, in Minnesota than it has happened generally, the investment in technology and providing services is an area where organizations across the globe and across the United States continue to invest in ability to meet people digitally, to provide digital services. And so oftentimes, I think our business partners, as a rate decreases or a rate moves or shifts, that money is invested then in projects and initiatives.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Tomes. And along the lines of the consolidate, that we're part of your funding request is to move out from infrastructure, physical data centers, which I'm all for. But what I think we're going to want to see as we move forward is, today, my understanding, we're only using one cloud provider. So when we always look at redundancy, you're going to be hard pressed to convince me we can always get redundancy when we limit to one provider. So you have, if you intend, which I haven't heard you not, planning to use a single provider, how is that going to work, and how do we get that redundancy? And then the second piece to that question is, does this get us to the ability to recover in real time? We've got real time data replication, all those things, and I think it brings that back. But outside of the ability to have just pure access from a login capabilities, right, some physical device, does it buy us that? And if not, what would be in the way of doing that?
Senator Coran and committee members, and I'm going to ask Chief Technology Officer Jeff Nyberg to chime in here just a little bit. Hopefully I won't answer the entirety of the question for him, but we in Minnesota unequivocally are a multi-cloud technology consumer, if you will. And that multi-cloud, really ranges from cloud solutions and SaaS services from a number of cloud providers, a lot of work, for example, in Amazon Web Services, a lot of work in Azure, a lot of work in Salesforce.com, and others. And we will always aspire to be and promote a multi-cloud environment. Having said that, there is absolutely some intentionality, of course, with how you work and the need to really get efficient and proficient and effective in doing things tremendously well. Jeff, if I could turn it over to you if there's anything else to add.
Mr. Nyberg, could you please state your name and your position for the record?
Yes, thank you, Chair Coran. Thank you, members. Thank you, Commissioner. As far as the ability to have resiliency and redundancy, we slipped over the slide that had been showing earlier, where I think Deputy Commissioner Acton mentioned we could nerd out on a little bit, and I think that's what I probably do best for this group, is the continuation from left to right on resiliency and what you're asking about in public cloud. So moving from left to right on the no redundancy, single points of failure, to having high availability in the local redundancy, like within a single data center, and then moving left to right into regional redundancy. This is where in a cloud construct, such as a public cloud, AWS or Azure, what have you, you are actually spread out across multiple data centers. So you're not subject to a single data center failure. Your services are actually distributed across multiple data centers by that cloud provider. So you get high availability, higher resiliency, disaster recovery capabilities built into the fabric of the service that you're consuming. If you were to go one step over further to the right, and the level of redundancy really comes down to what is the business need for the application. Because when you get into all the way on the right, let's just say we're running primarily in the Midwest region for a primary cloud provider. This then would give us the opportunity to go to yet another region and replicate our information so that you could have it resilient across geographical locations as well. So it's really the continuum to left to right, and that's what the cloud will help provide to us. It's a much more cost-effective and much faster way to achieve these levels of redundancy than you would have if you tried to do this with a physical brick and mortar location. The speed and the ability to have that resiliency so that service is up and running via cloud mechanisms is really powerful, and it's what's driving a lot of organizations, government, private sector, and beyond, to leverage these services because of the cost-effective nature of achieving the resiliency that businesses need, and the disaster recovery that we may need as well. So this slide, I hope, kind of illustrates that without me getting a little bit too nerdy or in the weeds with you today.
Thank you, Mr. Nyberg. I appreciate that conversation, and it is the direction we need to go. And we understand too that not everything needs the prioritization, critical services from a cost and the replicate, all of the service versus premium service, and then redundancy. I appreciate that explanation. So members, any other questions? Other members? Well, I don't see any other members. I certainly appreciate Commissioner Tomes and your team and the thorough explanation. It's important to us, and we'll continue to move forward. And as these requests are heard through the various bodies, and then get to the end of the session, and hopefully we come out with a good plan that we can get some of these things done. Some are one turn, a good one-time purchase. I'm really in favor of eliminating physical data centers for us. I think it would be a great move for us to move down that path. So appreciate your time, and everyone else. And with that, I see no further business before us. The committee will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Record.